All right, folks, here we are for the first segment of what's going to be a daily segment that we're going to introduce here. We did the little preamble and a little introduction on who we are and how we're going to try and bring information to you in a unbiased, unsensationalized forum. I'd like to welcome you over to our Facebook page where we're going to have a clearinghouse of information and we'll be doing our daily segments. That's going to be over on Facebook at Spill Speaks. Excuse me, that's Spill Speak. There is no S on the end of it. So come on over there and share your thoughts and ideas and get the information again from an unbiased, non-sensationalized standpoint. Tonight I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the media, and we're seeing a lot of it, and that is whether or not to nationalize the spill response effort as opposed to keeping it privatized. And I've been on spills that were both privatized and I've been on spills that were nationalized. And I just wanted to share with you a little bit of some of the experiences that I've encountered and a few of the little differences between the two. With privatization, that's where the responsible party who, after Oil Pollution Act of 90, which was, as we know, enacted after the Exxon Valdez, that dictates that the RP or the responsible party will take financial responsibility and command and control of the remediation of the spill with oversight from the proper governing bodies. In this case here, it's the United States Coast Guard. One of the advantages of having it privatized is in the event of processing claims, whether they be trying to recoup money that may have been lost from a restaurant, a hotel, some type of a business that was affected by it, and or some type of a workman's comp claim or an injury claim. It tends to be processed faster and the claims expedited if it's going through the privatized spill process as opposed to going through the nationalized spill process, because the nationalized spill process, they're going to have to determine one or not whether it is a valid claim, and then again they're going to be financing it on the front end of the response, but then they're going to be trying to recoup that money. So I just find that in most cases, those claims tend to get processed a little bit faster. On the nationalized side of that same thing, you're going to find that it becomes a little bit complicated for processing those claims and evaluating them and then reimbursing them because of the fact that it's not necessarily their money that they're spending. In this particular case, they would be spending BP's. In some cases, they would be spending taxpayer money and then going for the reimbursement. Also, the liability issues. With it nationalized, again, it becomes a little bit of a blurred line and becomes a little bit more complicated on determining the liability and who has it, whether it's now the national entity that's running and taking over the spill or whether or not it's the responsible party. So again, with the responsible party in that particular issue, it seems to be that it tends to be in the favor of the claimant in the event of some type of liability if it is privatized. As far as the regulatory compliance side of things, it seems that for the regulators, it's a little bit easier to hold the responsible party's feet to the fire, and it seems a little bit easier for them to enforce the regulations and then also force compliance. Whereas with the regulators governing another government entity, it becomes a little bit hazy on where those lines are drawn, and again, you can see for yourself there, and these points may or may not be disputable or something that some people view differently than what I'm reporting here. But for the most part, I find that it's easier for the regulators to force the issue if it's a privatized spill response as opposed to a nationalized spill response. The other thing that comes into play on these issues where we're talking about nationalization versus privatization is at what point do you consider the project completed or clean, if you will. And that is always a tough situation to determine when it's clean, so to speak. And in an environmental issue, that's what they go by, whether it be air, soil, water, whatever it may be, they have to at some point say enough is enough. Now, if it's privatized, obviously there's a financial incentive for them to determine that it's clean sooner than if it's a nationalized spill response. So again, most of these, once you break them down into different components of the response effort, it becomes very clear and evident as to who has the vested interest, whether it be nationalized or privatized. So there's a lot of things to consider in there, and I think the one issue that it's not a tangible issue, but it's certainly one that we're hearing about in the media, and I have seen it play out, and that is the security aspect of it. When I say the security aspect of it, what I'm talking about there is something where we feel more secure if we had our federal government in there doing the work. Whereas opposed with a private entity, there's emotions run high, there's frustrations, there's a lot of issues that come into play there where we may feel like our federal government could possibly do a better job. And in some cases they may, and in the Morris J. Berman spill down in San Juan, Puerto Rico, that was a nationalized spill. And in that particular case, you can go back and look, and that was a real case study on how a spill response should be managed and handled. And they did a magnificent job, and that was a nationalized spill response. Uh, I think on this one right here, because of the fact that BP has the financial depth and the incentive to do the job right, I think that it will remain privatized. But again, that's we don't know how that's going to shake out yet. But you can see that there are some pros and cons to it, and the other thing that's interesting on the privatized side of things, as what the Exxon Valdez was. One of the things that came into play after that I'm sure we'll probably see play out here on this, and that is that after the spill was over and some time had gone by, they formed a citizens advisory committee there in Valdez called the Regional Citizens Advisory Committee, and it was a group of people with vested interests such as the fishermen, people who depended on the tourism industry, concerned citizens. There may have been educators. There was a whole host of people who got elected into to the committee there at the Regional Citizens Advisory Board, and what they became was a very effective watchdog group. Because as we're seeing on this spill, as we see on many, you can't just fault the oil company for non-compliance with some of their items that were written in their plan. That plan was approved and in theory enforced and overseen by a government entity, and apparently there was breakdowns on both parts. Now, with this RCAC organization there in Valdez, we have found them to be a very effective group in both helping to implement new rules and regulations, and then also to oversee and make sure that these oil companies were in compliance. So I think in time to come, we'll see the same type of organizations be formed down here. It's a shame that they have to be formed in after the event. It's a shame that we couldn't have had those before, but this is one of those lessons that apparently we have to learn. So it'll be interesting to see how the nationalization, privatization debate rolls on. But anyway, that's a little bit of the history. We don't have a lot of time here on these segments. We're only allowed 10 minutes. So what we're going to do here this following week is we're going to get out in the field. We're going to gather some information, some interviews, and some film on a couple of the different aspects that we've been asked to come out and do on the response effort, and that's going to be the different types of remediation techniques, some of the wildlife rehabilitation processes and procedures, and we're gonna be bringing data in not just from here in the Louisiana area, but we're going to be working our way over towards Pensacola, Florida. And so we hope to be able to provide you with information again that's unbiased. And if you have any ideas, suggestions, or something that you particularly want to see us focus on, please give us a comment there on our Facebook page at Spill Speak, and we'll be answering your questions and trying to provide you up-to-date information. So thank you very much for your time.